let's talk about 28 Days Later. It's not just a horror movie, right? It's a total game changer. This is the film that literally made zombies run, and it completely reinvented a genre. But for all its cinematic genius, it's also a perfect guide on what not to do if you actually want to survive an apocalypse.
That line, it just sets the tone, doesn't it? The film does an incredible job of making you feel the absolute dread of the rage virus, that sense of a world just completely falling apart. But here's the thing. What makes for amazing, edge-of-your-seat filmmaking often makes for a terrible survival plan.
So that's what we're going to dig into. We're going to peel back the layers and separate the brilliant movie making from the pretty flawed logic. We'll look at what the film gets wrong about survival, and maybe more importantly, what it accidentally gets terrifyingly right. Okay, first things first. We have to talk about maybe the most iconic sequence in the whole movie, Jim waking up from his coma. He's all alone in a world that's just gone. It's haunting, it's visually stunning, but is it realistic? Not a chance. The movie gives us this silent, empty, almost peaceful version of London. But the reality of a major city collapsing would be the total opposite of silence. It would be an absolute symphony of chaos. Imagine millions of people trying to escape all at once. It would be pure panic. So yeah, forget those pristine, empty streets. In reality, every single road, every highway would be a parking lot of abandoned and crashed cars. Instead of silence, you'd have this constant background noise of car alarms, gunfire, and screaming. The city wouldn't look clean. It would be a messy, noisy graveyard of failed escapes. All right, so once Jim actually gets out of the city and links up with other survivors, their first few decisions are, from a survival perspective, full of some really critical mistakes. And this is a big one. The idea that you can just waltz into a perfectly stocked supermarket days or even weeks into the end of the world is one of the biggest myths in fiction. Just think about it for a second. The moment a crisis hits, what's the first thing people do? They panic buy. A store like this would have been stripped to the bone within hours and become a battleground, not some quiet pantry. And their attempt to signal for help from that rooftop, it is a perfect textbook example of what not to do. It's basically a 4-step guide to getting yourself killed. You're using bright lights on an exposed roof, which turns you into a giant beacon for everyone. You're not just signaling potential friends, you're attracting every infected person and every hostile survivor from miles around. It's just a huge, unnecessary risk. All that commotion leads them to hear a radio broadcast, which brings us to another classic and often fatal trope in apocalypse stories, the promise of a safe military sanctuary. You could call this idea a false hope fortress. It's a place that preys on desperation, offering a solution that seems way too good to be true, because it always is. That promise of safety and order is often just a mask for a much, much darker danger. And all the red flags were right there in that radio broadcast from Major West. It's a one-way message, right? There's no way to reply. It directs them to a super isolated place, and it makes this grand promise of the answer to infection, which should immediately set off alarm bells. Look, when one group holds all the power and makes all the rules, you're not being rescued, you're walking into a cage. But this is where the film gets really interesting. Because despite all these survival blunders, the final act accidentally teaches one of the most powerful and realistic lessons in the whole genre. The story stops being about surviving the infected and becomes something way darker. That one line of dialogue is honestly more chilling than any scream from an infected person. It's that moment the mask completely slips off, and we see the real horror of the sanctuary. These soldiers aren't trying to rebuild society. They're trying to repopulate it by force. The saviors have become the captors. And that is the film's most profound, most realistic takeaway. The rage virus might have ended the world, sure, but the biggest danger our survivors actually faced came from other people. When all the laws and consequences disappear, the most dangerous predators are often the ones who try to build a new world in their own violent image. It's a heavy lesson, and it leaves us with one last, really unsettling question to chew on. In a world with no rules, where desperation is everything, how do you ever really decide who's a friend and who's a foe? Who would you trust?